Hi kids and welcome to the Magic Show. In this magic trick we are going to follow the Hyperlambda Hello World tutorial. This is a video created for those who would rather prefer to follow video tutorials instead of text-based tutorials. So first we're going to have to create a new folder. Here I have Magic. Go to Files, then turn off Safe Mode, important. Click the Modules folder here and then click the New folder. Create a new folder called Tutorials and then open up that folder. Then inside of this folder we can start creating our tutorial files. Now I'm going to choose new file. I have the file name on my clipboard being helloworld.get.hl, implying this is an HTTP GET verb. It's a Hyperlambda file and its URL is hello-world. Then I'm going to click the file to select it, which allows me to edit it. Then I'm going to remove its existing content. Then I'm going to go back to the tutorial and copy this piece of code, paste it in, and save the file. And for simplicity reasons, I'm going to open up another browser tab by holding down Control and clicking the endpoints here. Then I'm going to open the endpoints, click Show Endpoints. And if you have a lot of endpoints here, you can actually filter by, by tutorials if you want to. Then you can click the Hello World endpoint and you can already invoke it. Congratulations, you have now officially created your first HTTP REST endpoint, and it simply results in the static string with the content of Hello World from Hyperlambda. So let's go back to our tutorial and then let's start doing some slightly more interesting stuff. Here we can see about how the file names ties into the HTTP verbs that the file is resolved using. And then later down here, we are going to create an echo service. Okay, so let's copy the file name. Let's go back to the file editor. Let's just collapse this guy and let's just create a new file. Paste in echo.post.hl, click OK, and click the echo.post.hl file and remove all of its content. And then let's copy this Hyperlambda and paste it in and click Save. We now have two HTTP endpoints. And one of them happens to be a post because of its file name here, saying .post.hl. So let's open up our endpoints and let's refresh this particular page. Unfortunately, we have to do that. Then click Show Endpoints, filter for echo if you want to, then click echo and paste in any type of JSON. Here's an example JSON payload if you wish. Paste it in here and click Post. And as you can see, basically the HTTP post REST endpoint simply echoes back to the client whatever we feed it as input. And in fact we can also, if we want to, we can invoke it here, or sorry, I lost myself a bit here. What is actually occurring here is that this payload, this JSON payload, is actually transformed into this as our file is being executed. The reasons why is because obviously we have two fields here, name and age, name being a string and age being a number. And this will result in that as our file is being executed on the server, this is how it's going to look like. So the arguments node here at the top is actually dynamically injected into our Lambda object, which is of course the result of parsing the Hyperlambda. And the thing that is being executed after the Hyperlambda has been parsed. And we can actually verify that by exchanging the file's content with this. And let's do it first, and let me explain afterward what it actually does. And then let's just invoke the endpoint once more. And let's open up yet another browser tab, this time the Logs browser menu item here. And click on the details of the top item. So you can see here, this actually results in transforming our entire Lambda object dynamically into a piece of string and then creating a log entry with our Hyperlambda representing our Lambda structure as the log item's content. And let's walk through the file here. Okay, so first it converts the Lambda object to Hyperlambda. Then it invokes log.info, which is one of the audit logging slots in Magic. Then it echoes back whatever it was given. And in fact, we can verify the echo parts by even pasting in a way more rich JSON payload here. If we go back to our files, endpoints menu item, we paste in this fairly complex JSON. You see we still get the echoed JSON back as a result. But if you now go to our log items and we actually refresh it and we have a look at the latest log item, then you will see here, this is the structure that our JSON is transformed into as it is invoking the Hyperlambda file. With that in mind, let's create something slightly more interesting. We can actually restrict arguments, which is very, very probably interesting, I presume. So let's change its content yet again to becoming this part down here beneath the restricting arguments section of this tutorial. And let's save the file and let's refresh here. Let's click show endpoints and filter for echo. Whoops. Now something interesting all of a sudden happened, because now you can see that we actually get an example payload here. Well, the reasons why we did that is because the HTTP REST endpoint resolver that resolves to our Hyperlambda file, it actually, as it is retrieving metadata for this particular HTTP REST endpoint, it actually opens the file and sees, hey man, I've got arguments here. And these are the arguments. It's a name field, which is of type string, and it's an age field, which is of type long. And this happens to become intelligently parsed by the front end, realizing, hey man, I've got arguments here, and these are the arguments. We now invoke this, we get the exact same result, more or less. However, we now have one crucial difference. Which is that we now have an explicit arguments collection here, implying if I try to inject a bogus argument into my payload, then the endpoint resolver is simply going to reject it. And it's even going to give you an intelligent piece of string saying exactly what argument it can't handle. So this allows us to explicitly declare what arguments or endpoints can legally handle. Because by default, if we omit this guy, the endpoint can handle anything, right? Which probably wouldn't be too smart to facilitate for in an actual real-world application. So let's go further down here. Here you can see an example of passing in a bogus payload, and here you can see how it results in an exception. Then further down here, we're going onwards towards actually creating something slightly more readable, useful, an actual HTTP REST endpoints that actually returns data from our database. Let's just collapse this guy and create a new file and paste in the file name being read-data.get.hl, so it's a get HTTP REST invocation. And then let's copy and paste this Hyperlambda into it. Let's open it up, paste in the Hyperlambda, and save, go to our files, our endpoints menu, refresh the page, click show endpoint, and filter for data. Ta-da! And of course, this is data from our database. That's the whole point, right? And it happens to be limited by 10, right? So we're here connecting to the MySQL database, and then we are invoking this particular SQL, resulting in, obviously, DB data reader. And then again, we are returning the results from the invocation towards MySQL.select back to the client, which of course is automatically transformed into JSON before it's returned to the client over its response payload. Now let's combine what we have taught ourselves so far by passing in arguments into our select database invocation. Okay, copy, paste, save, refresh our endpoints, click show endpoints, filter on data, click it, and ta-da! We now have a limit argument 2 and an offset argument 3, which we're invoking the HTTP get invocation with, and we're now getting only 2 records with an offset of 3. If we change the offset to 5, We'll see it returns different objects here. 7 different objects. If we limit it by 4, we'll return 4 records, etc. And then, in addition, we can, if we want to, we can add authorization to our HTTP REST endpoint by copying this line and pasting it in at the top here, just beneath the argument. By the way, for the record, you'd normally want to have the arguments being the top node of your Hyperlambda file, simply for clarity reasons. Then we invoke the auth.ticket.verify slot here, and we pass in a comma-separated string containing 2 different roles. The name of our roles being root and admin. What this basically does is that it ensures that nobody but the root and or admin users in our system, implying users, authenticated users belonging to one of these 2 roles, root or admin, can actually legally invoke our HTTP REST endpoints. And in fact, we can try it by refreshing here. Then we can click Show Endpoints. Then we can click F12 to show the Network tab. Then we can filter according to data. Click our data here, and here we can actually see auth here. The auth column says that only root and admin can invoke this endpoint. We can limit by 2. We can add an offset being 3. We can invoke the endpoint, and of course this works perfectly. However, if we now go down to our Network tab here in Google Chrome Inspect Tools, we copy this URL, Control Z, we click Control Shift N, we paste in the URL, boom, access denied. Why? Because we required the user to belong to one of these 2 roles, and of course, as I opened up an incognito browser tab window, didn't bring on any of my cookies or local storage, hence it tries to invoke the HTTP REST endpoint without a valid JWT token, implying I'm not authenticated. And that's it. And then you can see further down here at the bottom of this tutorial, you can see Control Z, Control V. You can see the equivalent version of the more or less the exact same Hyperlambda, except it now contains a description if we save the file. Go back to our endpoints, remove the Network tab, refresh, click Show Endpoints, find our data endpoint. You will see that now all of a sudden, ta-da! It actually has a description. It tells us with friendly words, hey man, I'm returning actors from your Sakila database, and here's my arguments. Right. So let's walk through it. This is meta data description node, and by the way, for the record, every single node that starts out with a dot, period, will not be attempted to be invoked as slots. Then it contains an explicit arguments collection saying, hey man, I can tolerate limit and offset, but nothing else. And they both have to be of type long, meaning numbers in JavaScript. Then it invokes auth.ticket.verify, passing in root, admin being the 2 roles that are the only roles that are legally allowed to actually access this endpoint, implying the user must be authenticated and belong to the role of root or admin in order to invoke the endpoint. Then it connects to my Sakila database. Then it invokes this SQL, passing in this SQL parameters, effectively being an apply from here, and then it returns the result of the above mysql.select invocation here at the bottom, which of course results in JSON being returned back to the client. Let's invoke it once more, just for kicks. 2, offset 3, get, ta-da, and there we are. And that was the tutorial in its entirety. Thank you for watching. Have a nice day.